At the family dinner, my mother-in-law said, "You are still here with your rickety car. I still don't understand why my daughter agreed to marry you. You are just a disgrace and good for nothing." I smiled and didn't talk back. When we got home, my next action changed everything. I will tell you how everything unfolded. First, let me thank you for your continuous support. If you love stories like this one, support us by subscribing to this channel and comment where you are watching us from. It will be great to hear from you. Now let's jump into the details of what happened. I've never been one to talk about money, not in the way most men do. No bravado, no flexing, just quiet, consistent work. I own a small logistics firm, not flashy, not viral, but stable. Trucks, contracts, supply routes. It's the kind of business that pays the bills, builds slowly, and doesn't need to prove itself. I built it from the ground up after I got laid off from my first job out of college. While others mocked the risk, I stayed focused. And when I married Denise, I promised myself that no matter what happened, I'd make her life easier. That included her family, even when they made it painfully clear they never wanted me around. From the start, Denise's mother saw me as less than. She had a certain image in her head: Ivy League, button-down finance guy, some polished type with smooth words and a trust fund. I wasn't that. I drove a beat-up Ford, wore scuffed boots to dinner, and didn't flinch when people talked over me. That seemed to infuriate her more than anything, that I didn't grovel. Still, I never said a word. I let her whisper her digs, roll her eyes when I spoke. I stayed silent, but I was always watching. 3 years into our marriage, Denise's parents hit a rough patch. Her father's pension had been mismanaged, their savings dwindled, and the house, the one she grew up in, was suddenly at risk. Denise was distraught. "We can help, can't we?" she asked me one night as we sat at the kitchen table, bills spread like confetti. I looked at her, saw the worry etched into her face, and nodded. No long discussion. No power play. I just said, "Yeah, we'll take care of it." And we did. I called my bank the next day. I set up automatic payments to cover their mortgage and utility bills. On paper, it all ran through Denise's account. Her mother never had to know. I didn't do it for gratitude. I'd long given up on expecting any. I did it for my wife, for the peace it brought her, and for the dignity of keeping family afloat without making a show of it. Over the next few years, it became routine. They never asked again because the help never stopped. Denise thanked me often, in small ways: a longer hug before bed, the way she looked at me when I fixed her father's truck without charging him a dime. But her mother? Her scorn only grew. Maybe because I stayed quiet, or maybe because deep down, she resented the fact that the man she considered a failure was the one keeping her lights on. One Sunday afternoon, I was under the carport replacing my brake pads when Denise came out with iced tea and sat beside me on the cooler. "Mom invited us to dinner," she said, cautiously. I wiped the grease from my hands and didn't say anything. "She's trying to be better," Denise added. "Please come." For me. And just like always, I agreed. For her. That dinner was a setup from the moment we walked in. Her mother greeted Denise with a tight hug, then glanced at me like I was a stain on her carpet. Her father gave me a nod, half-hearted, like he knew how things stood but didn't have the spine to challenge her. We sat around their worn-out dining table, and her mother laid out roast chicken and mashed potatoes like it was Thanksgiving. All for show. She made small talk, asked about my little delivery job, and when I said business was steady, she smirked. "Still driving that rickety car?" she asked, pouring herself more wine. "I mean, really. I still don't understand why my daughter agreed to marry you. You're just a disgrace. Good for nothing." That silence, the kind that follows a slap, fell over the room. I felt Denise stiffen beside me, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. Her father coughed into his napkin. I looked around that table, saw the plates, the food we paid for, the lights we kept on, the house we'd saved, and I smiled. I didn't say a word. I didn't storm out or raise my voice. I just smiled, stood up, and excused myself politely. Denise followed a few minutes later, her face flushed with anger and shame. We drove home in silence. Not the cold kind, but the kind that hums with meaning. When we got inside, I didn't pace or rant. I poured a glass of water, sat down at the table, and opened my laptop. "Are you okay?" Denise asked, standing across from me. "I'm fine," I said, typing. "I'm just making some adjustments." She sat quietly while I logged into our bank accounts. I canceled the automatic mortgage payments first, then the utilities. Finally, I deleted the recurring monthly transfer she had been sending from her account using my income. 3 clicks. That was it. Denise didn't stop me. She just whispered, "She doesn't know it's been you all along." "I know," I replied. And I meant it. I knew exactly who I was dealing with, and I was done being her silent safety net. I replayed that dinner for days, like a bad movie stuck on a loop in my head. The way her mother curled her lip as she said it, like I was something she stepped over on the sidewalk. "You're just a disgrace. Good for nothing." It wasn't new, but something about hearing it again, in my own house of support. The house I was keeping afloat turned something inside me. It wasn't rage. It wasn't sadness. It was finality. Like a switch had flipped, and whatever had kept me tolerating it for years, maybe pride, maybe love, had finally burned out. I kept quiet as we went about our week. I didn't bring it up to Denise, and she didn't either. But I noticed she stayed closer, lingering in rooms longer than usual, checking in more often, asking if I wanted anything when she made tea. Guilt does that to people, even the ones who weren't to blame. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that she wanted to defend her mother, but knew there was nothing she could say that wouldn't dig the hole deeper. By Thursday, the silence had curdled into something heavier. We sat on the couch watching a rerun of a cooking show, neither of us really paying attention, when Denise finally broke. Her voice cracked softly, like she wasn't even sure she should speak. "She doesn't mean it, you know." I didn't look at her. "She's been meaning it for years. She's just from a different time," she said, weakly. Her dad talked to her that way. "It's how she thinks strong people behave. She thinks cruelty is strength." "I'm not defending it," Denise said quickly, placing a hand on my arm. "I'm just saying. I don't think she understands what she's saying half the time." I looked at her then. Her eyes were glassy, hopeful, like if she explained her mother long enough, I might come back to the version of myself that forgave quietly. But that part of me felt gone, burnt out, worn thin. "Denise," I said gently, "I paid your family's mortgage for 4 years. I paid their electric bill. I paid their gas. I've given them close to 80 grand. And your mother stood in that dining room, wearing a sweater I bought her for Christmas, eating food I paid for, and called me a disgrace." Her breath hitched. "I know. I'm not mad," I said. "I'm done." She looked away. "Does that mean you're done with me too?" That hit harder than anything her mother ever said. I leaned forward, hands clasped between my knees. "No," I said firmly. "I love you. But I'm done being the silent donor to a woman who hates me. She doesn't have to like me, Denise. But I'm not paying her bills just to be insulted." Denise nodded slowly, like the truth was settling into her bones. "She's going to notice soon." "I know," I said. "And when she does, she can figure it out on her own." And she did 2 weeks later. It started with the missed payment notices. First the water bill, then the electric. The bank called about the mortgage. Denise's phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls. I knew her mother wouldn't dare call me directly, not yet. She hadn't figured out the full picture. She still believed the money came from her daughter. That illusion was her last piece of pride. One afternoon, Denise came into my home office holding her phone like it was a live grenade. She just left a voicemail. "Want to hear it?" I nodded. She pressed play and tossed the phone onto the desk. Her mother's voice was unmistakable, shrill, tight with panic. "Denise, what is going on with the accounts? The power company said the bill's overdue. The bank said the mortgage didn't go through. Are you and that husband of yours cutting us off? After everything we've done for you? This is not acceptable. Call me back." I chuckled, low and bitter. "After everything we've done for you?" Denise didn't laugh. She sat down slowly, looking at me like she was choosing between 2 cliffs to jump off. "I should just tell her, shouldn't I?" "You can if you want," I said. "But don't expect gratitude." She didn't hesitate. She picked up her phone, dialed, and walked into the other room. I stayed put, pretending to read emails, but my ears tuned in. The walls in our house weren't thick enough to block the kind of shouting that followed. "You want to know why the payment stopped, Mom?" Denise's voice rang out. "Because they were never coming from me. They were from him. My husband. The one you treat like garbage." A pause. Then more yelling. A frantic, defensive scramble on her mother's end. Denise kept going. "For years. He paid the mortgage, the bills, everything. And he never told you because he didn't want to embarrass you. And what did you do? Sit at that table and call him a disgrace. A disgrace, Mom. You should be ashamed. Another pause. Then, no, you call him. If you want that money back, if you want to fix this, you call and apologize. And then she hung up. She walked back into the room, cheeks flushed, hands trembling slightly. She'll call, she said simply. And later that evening, she did. My phone rang around 8:30. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again. And again. On the fourth try, I answered. Hello, I said calmly. There was a beat of silence. Then her voice, softer than I'd ever heard it. Hi. It's Margaret. I know. I wanted to say I'm sorry. About dinner. About what I said. Another pause. Waiting for me to say something. I didn't. She continued. I didn't realize how much you've done. I was wrong. I didn't treat you right. And I'm asking, please, if you can find it in your heart to continue helping us, just until we can get things back on track. And just like that, I knew. It wasn't an apology. It was a strategy. She hadn't called to make peace. She'd called to reclaim the money. I held the phone to my ear, breathing slow. You were right, I said flatly. What? You were right. I am good for nothing. So find someone else to use. I hung up before she could speak again. I didn't feel triumph after hanging up the phone. There was no rush of victory, no fist pump, no cinematic swelling of background music. Just silence. It wrapped around me like a weighted blanket, thick and full of consequences. I sat there for a long time after the call ended, my phone still warm in my hand. The living room was dark, lit only by the lamp in the corner and the muted flicker of the paused TV screen. Denise didn't ask what I said. She just stood in the hallway, arms folded, her face drawn tight with emotion. She knew. She'd known even before I picked up that phone that whatever happened next, her mother wouldn't get what she wanted. It was a strange kind of grief that settled over the house after that. Not the kind you cry over, not immediately. It was the slow, sinking grief of realizing that peace had always been a performance, and now that the curtain had been pulled back, we had to sit in the mess. Denise was quieter, not because she disagreed, but because she felt the splintering of two loyalties at once. She didn't speak badly of her mother, but she didn't defend her either. She moved through the days like someone walking a tightrope, balancing her love for me against a lifetime of trying to keep her mother's wrath at bay. 3 days passed without another call, then 5, then a full week. I knew Margaret wouldn't go quietly, but even I underestimated just how loud her silence could be. It started with her pulling Denise from the family group chat. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. Then came the text to her siblings, subtle jabs about loyalty and how some people change once money gets involved. Denise showed me one message from her older brother. Mom's upset. She said, "You've chosen your husband over your family. Is this true?" As if that choice hadn't been made the day Margaret looked me in the face and spit on everything I'd done in silence. Denise didn't respond to her brother. She just tossed the phone on the bed and exhaled, sharp and bitter. It's like they never even asked who was paying for all this. They didn't want to know, I said. It's easier to believe you were the one helping. It fits the story they'd tell themselves. She nodded. Now I'm the traitor. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the pain behind her eyes. You don't have to defend me. I'm not, she whispered. I'm defending the truth. Despite everything, I still half expected her mother to come around. Maybe not with sincerity, but at least with strategy. I thought she might soften, try another angle, ask her husband to step in, pull some sentimental card. But she didn't. Instead, she leaned in harder, doubling down with every whisper and passive-aggressive comment funneled through extended family. We were at the grocery store the next week when Denise ran into her cousin, Marissa. I watched the conversation from a distance while loading things onto the belt, but I could see from the way Denise's shoulders stiffened that it wasn't a friendly catch-up. On the way home, she was quiet until we hit the freeway. She said Grandma heard that we were abandoning Mom and Dad, that they're in danger of foreclosure, that I'm letting you dictate everything now. I gripped the wheel tighter. Did you tell her the truth? I did, she said. And she didn't believe me. Of course she didn't. People don't like having their assumptions challenged, especially when those assumptions have kept them comfortable. Margaret had woven this narrative for years. that her daughter married below her station, that I was tolerated for Denise's sake, and that everything they had, they'd earned. My involvement was an inconvenience to that story, a crack in the illusion. And now, without the money flowing, the entire house of cards was falling apart. A week later, Denise's father showed up unannounced. It was a Wednesday evening, just after dinner. He knocked instead of ringing the bell, which already told me something was off. Denise opened the door and stepped back like she'd seen a ghost. "Dad." He looked uncomfortable, clutching his cap in both hands like a schoolboy in trouble. "Can I come in?" She looked at me. I nodded once. He sat on the edge of the couch like he wasn't sure he'd be allowed to stay. Denise offered him water, which he declined. Then he looked at me, eyes tired and rimmed red. I just wanted to say, "I didn't know." I didn't respond. "I mean it," he said. "I didn't know it was you paying those bills. Margaret told me it was Denise. Said she wanted to keep us afloat privately." I raised an eyebrow. "And you didn't think to ask?" He looked down at his hands. "No, I didn't want to seem ungrateful." Denise snorted. "You didn't want to ask questions because it was easier that way." He didn't argue. "You're probably right." There was a pause, thick and heavy. "I'm not here to ask for anything," he finally said. "Just to say I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. And I'm sorry I didn't stop her that night. I should have said something." I believed him mostly. He wasn't a cruel man, just passive. Weak in the ways that let stronger personalities bulldoze everyone else. His apology wasn't rehearsed. It was weary, quiet, and real. But that didn't change the fact that he'd let it happen for years. "Thank you," I said. "But it's done." He nodded. "Understood." He stood, put his cap back on, and turned to Denise. "You don't deserve this either, honey. I hope one day things change." Then he left. That night, I held Denise while she cried, quietly, into my shoulder, like she didn't want the tears to make a sound. We didn't speak. We didn't need to, because the silence was already saying everything. By the second week, the silence started to rot. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt calculated. A hell breath. A coiled spring. Something waiting just beyond the edge of decency to snap back. Denise was still firm in her stance, still supporting me, but I could feel the weight pressing on her chest every time her phone lit up with a cousin's name or a group chat whispering about what really happened. The family grapevine was busy, spinning its usual mix of sympathy and sabotage. We didn't answer. We didn't explain. We just lived. But silence doesn't make fire disappear. It just gives it more time to burn unchecked. When the apology finally came, it didn't arrive as a letter or a text. It was a visit. Unannounced. Uninvited. Margaret pulled up to our house in a sleek black SUV, definitely not hers. She must have borrowed it. Presentation mattered to her, even in humiliation. She walked up the front steps in heels too sharp for sincerity and rang the bell twice, as if trying to assert control before we even saw her face. I stood at the front window and watched her fix her hair in the reflection of the glass door. She wasn't nervous. She was rehearsing. "Don't open it," Denise whispered behind me. "She didn't come here to apologize." "Not really." "I know," I said, "but I want to hear her try." I opened the door slowly. She smiled like we were old friends reunited after a misunderstanding. "Hi, sweetheart," she said, looking past me to Denise. "Can we talk?" Denise didn't move. "Say what you came to say." Margaret blinked, just once. Then she took a step forward, trying to brush the performance back into place. "I wanted to come here in person, to say I'm sorry for what I said. It was out of line." I leaned against the doorway. "Out of line." She nodded. "Yes, I was harsh, and I didn't know everything. If I'd known what you were doing for us, how much you'd done, I never would have said those things." There it was. The reveal. The reason for her visit. Not guilt. Not remorse. Information. She hadn't changed her mind about me. She'd just learned something new. Something that changed the stakes. "You mean you wouldn't have said them out loud?" I replied calmly. "But you'd still believe them." She tilted her head, trying to summon her maternal voice, the one she used on Denise as a child. "I don't think that's fair." "Fair," I repeated. "You sat in your house, eating food I paid for, under a roof I saved, and told me I was good for nothing. That wasn't a slip-up. That was your truth." She paused. Her eyes flicked to Denise, who hadn't spoken. I was upset. I was worried. We were falling behind. Things were tight. And that justified attacking me. I didn't know. You didn't care to know. I cut in. For years. Her face hardened, just for a second. The mask cracked. Well, I'm here now. And why is that? I asked. Because your electricity got cut off? Because your check bounced? No. She snapped, and then caught herself. No. I came because family is important. And I want to make things right. I laughed, short and bitter. You want the money back. She took a sharp breath. You're twisting this. No, I said. I'm just not pretending anymore. Denise stepped beside me now, her arms crossed, voice cold. You didn't call for 2 weeks. You didn't even text. You told Uncle Martin I was brainwashed. You told Grandma we abandoned you. And now you want to play the loving mother. Margaret's face twisted in frustration. I was hurt. I felt betrayed. You chose him over your own mother. No, Denise said. I chose the one who actually showed up. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was clear. It was final. I looked her in the eye, and the words came easy. You called me good for nothing. So let's just say you were right. I'm good for nothing. I have nothing for you. No money, no pity, and no more chances. Margaret opened her mouth, but I was already closing the door. She didn't ring again, didn't knock, just stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked back to the SUV. We watched her drive away, the exhaust clouding the air behind her. Denise didn't cry this time. She just sank onto the couch like a weight had been lifted. I think that was the first time she's ever been told no. Probably, I said, sitting beside her. And it won't be the last. We sat there for a long time, just breathing, not celebrating, not mourning, just sitting in the clarity of what had been severed and why it needed to be. There's a strange freedom in being misunderstood, especially when it's by someone who's made a habit of twisting your kindness into weakness. For years, I let her words slide off me, thinking silence was the high road. But silence, I've learned, doesn't always keep peace. Sometimes it just gives people the room to sharpen their knives. This time I spoke. This time I drew the line. And now, she knows exactly where it is. The strange thing about closure is that it doesn't feel the way people say it will. It doesn't show up in a neat little box with a bow. It doesn't come with fireworks or an epiphany. Sometimes, closure just feels like walking into a room that used to suffocate you and realizing you can finally breathe. That's how it felt the next morning when I woke up next to Denise. The house was quiet, peaceful, but not the fragile kind. This was something sturdier, real. I felt it settle into my bones like a weight I didn't even know I'd been carrying had finally dropped. But peace never lasts in families like ours, not without retaliation. The backlash came swift and loud, like a slap across the face. First came the group chat, reignited with venom. Denise was called ungrateful, a puppet, even a traitor. Her aunt accused her of turning her back on blood for the sake of a man with no manners. Her cousin posted a vague status online about people who forget where they came from. And then, just when I thought Margaret had shown all her cards, she did what manipulators do best. She played the victim. A Facebook post, plain white background, black text. After everything we've done for our daughter, this is how we're repaid. Heartbroken. Praying for guidance. The comments flooded in. Hugs, prayers, thinly veiled jabs at us from relatives who never paid a single one of her bills. And then the DMs started, first to Denise, then to me. Some were nasty. Some were performatively concerned. Is everything okay between you two? We heard Margaret is having a breakdown. You should check in. She's still your mother-in-law. I didn't respond to any of them. But Denise, God bless her, tried to hold the line. She posted her own message. Just one. No details. Just truth. For years, my husband financially supported my parents without ever asking for thanks. When he finally set boundaries after being repeatedly disrespected, we were cut off, gossiped about, and vilified. If you're wondering what happened, ask why no one ever asked what he was doing behind the scenes. I'm proud of the man I married. It was the kind of statement that split the family down the middle. Some stayed silent. Some unfriended her. And one or two, only two, messaged her quietly to say they were proud. By the end of the week, we were pariahs. But oddly, that isolation felt like freedom. No more pretending. No more obligatory dinners where I sat like a piece of worn furniture in the corner. No more nodding while they laughed at my expense. The charade was over, and I finally knew who I was dealing with. All of them. Then, one night, Margaret called again. It was just past midnight. Denise was asleep. I almost didn't answer. But something told me I needed to hear what came next. I picked up, said nothing. "I hope you're happy," she spat, skipping the pretense entirely. "You've ruined this family." "I didn't ruin anything," I said calmly. "I just stopped financing the illusion." "You're smug," she hissed. "You think you're better than us because you have a few dollars in the bank." "No," I replied. "I think I'm better because I never threw a single insult while paying your bills." "And you?" "You can't go 5 minutes without demeaning someone who made your life easier. You're just a delivery man with a savior complex." That one stung, not because it was true, but because it revealed what she really thought of me. Even after everything. Even after knowing the truth. "And you're a grown woman who lived off her daughter's marriage," I said flatly. There was silence on the other end. Then a bitter laugh. "You think you've won. But families remember. People remember. And you'll regret this when your wife starts to see who you really are." That was the last line. The last card in her deck. The one she'd been holding all along, the wedge she thought she could drive between us. I didn't shout. I didn't curse. I didn't explain. I just said, "Good night, Margaret," and hung up. The next morning, I told Denise about the call. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just nodded, her face unreadable for a long moment. Then she said something that stuck with me. She thought I'd leave you if she made it hard enough. I looked at her, and there was no doubt in her voice. She was wrong, she added. From that moment on, I knew the worst had already happened, and we'd survived it. No more apologies. No more negotiations. Margaret had made her choice, and we had made ours. And the world hadn't ended. We were still standing. Days turned into weeks. The house felt lighter. Denise started laughing again, genuine, unguarded laughter. I went back to work with a clearer mind. Our marriage didn't just survive, it got stronger. And Margaret? She faded into the background, her drama exhausted, her audience dwindling. Because even manipulators can't maintain the spotlight forever. Not when the truth is louder. And for the first time in a long time, I stopped bracing for the next insult. Because I knew who I was now. Not the man she called good for nothing. Not the man who needed her approval. I was the man who knew the value of silence and when to end it. In the weeks that followed, I came to understand something no one tells you about setting boundaries. Even when you do it for the right reasons, it doesn't feel good right away. There's a part of you, usually the part that grew up around chaos, that still flinches at the sound of silence. That still waits for the fallout. That wonders if maybe this time, you went too far. Even when your head knows better, your heart lags behind, searching for peace in places that never offered it. That was me, most mornings. I'd wake up before Denise, sit at the edge of the bed, and stare out the window, listening to a world that had suddenly gotten quieter. No messages. No surprise calls. No drama. The fire had finally gone out, but the smoke still hung in the air. That's what they don't talk about with boundaries, the burn marks left behind. I wasn't second-guessing myself. Not really. But I was grieving the version of me that tolerated it all. The man who stayed silent, who paid the bills and bit his tongue, who thought that if he just did enough, he could earn his place at the table. That man was gone now, and the world didn't fall apart without him. If anything, it got clearer. Denise started reaching out to people on her terms. Her sister, who'd stayed out of the fray, invited us to dinner one night. It was the first family event since everything blew up. We were cautious but open, and to our surprise, it wasn't a trap. Her sister had questions, real ones. Not accusatory. Just curious. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" she asked me as we cleared the dishes together in the kitchen. I shrugged. "Because I wasn't doing it for the credit." She nodded slowly. "But it cost you more than money, didn't it?" That moment hit me harder than expected. Not because of the question, but because of how rare it was for someone in that family to see me. To really see what had happened behind the curtain. And it reminded me that not everyone in her orbit was blind or cruel. Some were just misled. But Margaret? She stayed silent. Not in a regretful way, just strategic. Word eventually got back to us that she and her husband had sold the house. downsized to a small condo in another town. The mortgage was too much without my support. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I felt nothing, really. Just a quiet understanding that life has a way of rebalancing itself, whether you want it to or not. One afternoon, I was organizing receipts in my home office when Denise came in holding an envelope. "It's from her," she said, handing it to me. I looked at it for a long moment. No return address, just our names in that sharp, meticulous handwriting Margaret used on every birthday card she ever sent us. Inside was a check, $5,000, a note scribbled in the corner. "Returning what we can. Sorry for the trouble." That was it. No signature, no apology, just a cold transaction, like settling a tab. I put the check back in the envelope and slid it into my desk drawer. "You're not going to cash it?" Denise asked. "No," I said, "but I want to keep it." "Why?" I looked at her, and for the first time, I smiled without bitterness. "Because it reminds me that even the people who refuse to say sorry still know they were wrong." She nodded, walked over, and wrapped her arms around me from behind. "You've always been the bigger person." "Not always," I said. "But I've finally learned where to draw the line." And that's where the story ends, not with a dramatic reunion, not with tears or reconciliations, but with a quiet certainty. I didn't burn bridges. I just stopped rebuilding them every time she tore them down. I stopped handing out grace to someone who saw kindness as weakness. And in doing so, I found something more valuable than peace. I found myself. I stopped wondering what they thought of me. I stopped waiting for them to change. I stopped chasing approval I never needed to begin with. And in that stillness, I realized something Margaret never could. That dignity isn't something anyone can give you. It's something you decide to keep. Have you ever stayed silent to keep peace with someone who never deserved your loyalty? Tell me your story in the comments. How you drew the line, how it changed you, or how you're still working up the courage to walk away. Remember, sometimes, choosing yourself means losing people who never truly saw you. And that's not a loss. That's freedom. See you soon in the next story.